Ahoy there! Captain Benzie here, coming at you with another video for EVE Echoes. Today is Thursday, which means it's time for another 4 questions to be answered in the EVE Echoes official Twitter account's weekly developer Q&A series. Now, I know that not all of you have access to Twitter or want to have access to Twitter, so I like to collect these answers together and just read them out so that everyone's informed as to what's going on. I also like to give my personal thoughts and opinions on them, and, well, you know what, you guys seem to enjoy it, so I'm going to keep doing it. There is a playlist of previous developer Q&As if you're interested to know what is coming into EVE Echoes in the future, and if you have a particular question that you yourself would like to have answered, there is a link which I'll put in the description below, or you can ask in-game or on Discord, and you can ask your questions. The 4 questions that are chosen to be answered each receive a month of basic Omega, which I personally think is pretty cool. Anyway, subscribe to the channel if you want to see more stuff like this for EVE Echoes, and if you do want to support financially, we have a Patreon and a Redbubble merchandise store as well, both are linked in the description. Now today's thumbnail image and starting image is me flying the Silent Rose Hurricane in a low-sec encounter, and we'll talk about why I've chosen this later on. Now the first question we have: can we please have capacitor transfer skills? Shield and armor have dedicated skills, so should the final Logi component. Now Cloud responds: we do not have any immediate plans on adding capacitor transfer skills. We've been mostly focusing on adding skills for modules that already are being used by a larger player base. If we add skills for too many modules, it would raise the requirement higher than we'd like for players to specialise in a particular type of ship. We will consider adding other attribute bonuses to boost the effectiveness of this type of module. Now that's actually a really good point there. One of the great things about logistics vessels and e-war vessels is that you don't necessarily need to skill into anything overly specific. If you fancy flying an Osprey or a Scythe, a Bantam or a Burst for example, it's the same remote shield boosting skill that both of those use. Obviously one of them being cruiser, one of them being frigate sized. So it's very cheap and easy to skill into. For someone who is perhaps being a frigate or destroyer main for the most part for sort of their solo play, it means that if you want to be involved in fleets, you can buy a cheap logistics vessel and you can skill into it nice and easily. Just a few skills here and there into things like cruiser engineering, cruiser command, and the remote shield boosting skill. And that's all you need. As soon as you start adding more skills, not only does it mean that you've suddenly got a higher point of entry for anyone who wants to actually do this seriously, it also means that, simply put, you're starting to break balance. The game is designed with certain aspects in mind. Now obviously damage is something that is going to keep ramping up as we add more and more of like the X-type modules and things like that, and we see that higher damage modules come out, but the kind of point of logistics is it does have a capping point, and especially with things like capacitor is a limiting factor on most ships, and if you suddenly have skills that massively reduce the amount of capacitor that is required for things, or the ability to transmit capacitor, that does have a knock-on effect. Please note, I'm not saying that this shouldn't exist, but I'm pointing out that even the Nosferatu skills, if you look at electronic warfare, it changes the range of electronic warfare Nosferatus and things like that, but it does not change a Nosferatu's effectiveness, because that suddenly has wide-ranging ramifications, and quite frankly, yeah, it's the same when it comes to the group capacitor transmitters. I know that ultimately they are very useful modules, but if you make them too good, you suddenly negate the purpose to even have sort of any skill using it. An argument for this kind of thing is kind of like, again, if you look at healers in other RPGs, like Final Fantasy XIV or World of Warcraft, even Guild Wars, etc., when you are healing someone, you have a limited pool of mana, and it's usually designed in such a way that if you just keep healing, you are going to run out of mana. You have to balance your mana with your healing capabilities, and if the tank is taking more damage than you can, comfortably heal, you're going to go out of mana very, very quickly. It is a designed limiting factor. And thus having the ability to essentially feed people infinite capacitor, that does become a problem. So it's something that needs to be looked at very carefully. The second question: do you plan to make any changes to the new scanners introduced in the new update after having seen what happened this week with many players who died doing story missions, mainly the new ones? Since it's one of the few ways to get ISK and advance in the game, and right now it's not possible, thank you. Wilson, very well, says, "We are currently discussing how to help with this, as well as making missions more rewarding. We will share more info about this as it gets finalised." My goodness, I could write a treatise on this at this point. Basically, if you don't want to be scanned, stick to high sec. You have to accept that that means you are going to get less ISK. You do not deserve to get top tier ISK if you are not willing to engage with the game. If you're not willing to have risk added into there, you do not deserve the top tier ISK. Top tier risk equals top tier ISK. You don't get to choose which side of that equation you want to have. There are still ways to make ISK using encounter running. It is just not as lucrative anymore, which thank goodness is exactly what EVE Echoes needed. We are already seeing the market massively stabilizing and adjusting to this. Plex has dramatically dropped in price, despite the fact that I would assume a lot of people are using Plex to buy some of the scanners and things now. Plex is dropping in price for the first time in a long time. And why? Because this is basic economics. What we currently have is a small group of encounter runners in low sec who are doing things like Bad Hair Day on endless repeat, making sort of 150, 200 million ISK per round of doing it, and they were doing that completely safely. That means you have essentially what I would refer to as an ISK dragon, someone who is just hoarding ISK. Because when you've got a Dominix fully kitted out with everything you need to run one of these things completely AFK, what do you do with the rest of your ISK? Well, now you can buy B-type and A-type and X-type gear, which is very, very expensive. But even then, what happens? That's going to make you do those encounters easier, and if those encounters were completely safe, well, you're just going to keep hoarding ISK. And ISK and any market, any basic market on planet Earth, always responds to the top, not to the bottom. So when you have people like in our world, like Jeff Bezos, with massive amounts of money, and yes, we're going on a socialist rant here, stop me, you get a situation where someone, you know, when you buy the top tier refrigerator and you put the most expensive beer in the world in it and the most expensive beef in the world in it, eventually you run out of things to buy. When you've got enough yachts that you don't know what to do with them, that money just accrues and the markets respond to the top rate, not to the bottom, which means things go up, prices and that will go up, and all of that based on who can afford it most. This means that ships, modules, etc. are now being priced in such a way that only the people at the top can afford them. So bringing those people back down and stopping them from soloing the top tier content in the game is by design. It is a good thing, it is a necessity, and it is good for the entire community. And yeah, I know I sound pretty bitter at this point, but I am sick of the complaints on this where people are basically saying, I cannot solo AFK the game anymore and still earn top dollar. And that's the point. That is the point. If you want to earn top dollar, you need to actually be good at the game. You need to actually engage with the game. Which brings us to the next horrific question on here, and the reason that I showed a picture of me doing a low-sec encounter. About the scanning system, I do most of my encounters while watching something or doing other stuff, and by the time I realise that someone scanned my ship or system, it's too late. Is there any plans to add a sound when you get scanned? Now Wilson, again, says, we plan on adding a sound effect to help alert players when they're being scanned. This feature should be added sometime after August. Good, I'm in no hurry to get that added there. Again, I do most of my encounters while watching something or doing other stuff, and by the time I realise someone scanned, it's too late. If you're going AFK in anomalies, you do not deserve... If you're not willing to play the game, you don't deserve to get the top tier rewards. I'm getting so tired of saying this now. If you don't engage with the game, if you don't want to play the game, you do not deserve to get the top tier rewards. And that means if you're going to sit there in an encounter going AFK and someone scans you and blows you the hell up, then you deserve it. You absolutely deserve it. That is part and parcel of this whole thing of risk versus reward. You want the reward, but you don't want the risk. You don't want to engage with the game, but you want the best it has to offer. And I am massively against that. I think that people who are playing this game and working hard should be able to achieve anything. But I think that people who want to sit there and just play AFK all the time should delete EVE Echoes and go and play Idle Miner Tycoon or something. Because I am sick and tired of, can we transport support my entire fleet completely AFK? Can I play the game AFK? Can you make it so that my ship just automatically locks on to things? Can you make it so that I automatically fire on everything? Yeah, cool. So why don't we just get it to the point where you automatically select your encounters, you autopilot to every encounter, you then automatically move to the encounter, you automatically lock on, and you automatically shoot everything in perfect order, and then move off to complete safety. What is the freaking point in playing the game if that's what you want to do? Wilson, yeah, add the sound effect. Add the poxy sound effect so that people get notified. But for crying out loud, make it so that that sound effect doesn't have its own unique volume slider. If you want the game to be on loud so you can hear all the cannons and things like that, then good. If you're sitting there watching YouTube videos while playing and someone blows you up, that's your own fault for not paying attention. If you're in low sec, you should be paying attention. And I'm tired of people complaining that, oh, I lost the ship when I wasn't watching the game. Yeah. That's the point. Please, tell me how well you do in PUBG or Call of Duty, how you do in League of Legends or any other competitive game out there if you just decide that you're going to put the game down and just watch YouTube videos. You're probably not going to do well, so why do you expect it here in Eve Echoes? Yes, Benzie is done with your shit, and yes, I said that on YouTube. Moving onwards before I give myself a hernia. Freight delivery orders were given stricter time limits to complete a few patches ago. This was good for the players sending requests so that they get their items faster, but it has changed how piloting freight feels. Even for larger sized crates, some of those time limits discourage using the large ships like the Nereus Hauling and Humpback because of how slow they move. Will there be an opportunity in the future for the freight pilot to increase time limits with skills, or a higher collateral adjustment to so these ships can be more useful again? We're currently discussing how to help with this, as well as making missions more rewarding. We will share more info about this as it gets finalised. As someone put in my comment section recently, I'm looking for the freight overhaul, and the hauling overhaul I think is a brilliant little play on words there, and I agree. I do see that on one hand, you want people to engage with this system, so things need to be able to be moved quickly. On the other hand, as I said, someone sent me a message where they showcased that they had picked up a new crate that had an 11 billion ISK collateral. They pay 11 billion ISK to get the privilege of delivering this item, then they get that 11 billion back, plus the rewards for delivering. Unfortunately, in this case, it was about 6 minutes to get from Jita all the way down to Amar, which is just not going to happen even in a bloody frigate. So, yeah, that sucks. It sucks to lose 11 billion ISK to something like that. I don't know the answer to this. I don't know the answer to this because I don't really do much in the way of freighting. I tend to be more active when I play the game. I'm obviously encounter running and doing PvP and things like that, scanning. I don't do much freight, and I should. I really should actually sit down and engage with the freight mechanics, talk to some freighters, and see exactly how this all works and what they want to do. I think netties need to do the same. They need to sit down and talk to freighter pilots and say, right, what are you expecting from this? How do you want this to work? How would this work? And I think that'd be a great way to engage with the community. So, if you are a freighter pilot, please flag yourself in the comment section below. Tell me, how do you think we could solve this? Because I'm not sure that just giving a skill that enhances how long you get to do a mission, you know, to run an encounter, sorry, not to run an encounter, to run one of these freighter runs, I'm not sure that just increasing that by your skills really helps, because it means you're then delaying it to the customer. It's a tricky situation, and I don't honestly have any ideas myself as to how you can fix this. So please, if you're a hauler and you have some ideas, let me know in the comment section down below. I will pose those to the developers in a way that I know they can see and they will pay attention to. I think hauling definitely does need an overhaul, but bumtish. I think there's a lot of people who are, you know, they like this playstyle. I talked about it before the game even launched, that hauling is one of those really unique styles. It's a really unique way of playing EVE, and it's absolutely necessary to help the game flow. But right now, there's a lot of risk involved in it in certain ways, and not much reward. No one wants to pick up an 11 billion ISK container only to find that they physically cannot deliver it in time. That sucks. That really, really sucks. So I don't know, maybe have a time that, you know, the item is going to stop being up for delivery and then the system will deliver it itself. But when someone picks it up, it starts a new timer based on the distance and the sort of the accepted speed of delivery. Like if you pick something up in Jita and it's due for a Mar, and you know that something like a Nereus hauler takes 15 minutes, give it an 18-minute delivery window, something like that. I don't know. I'm spitballing here because I don't know freight. Let me know in the comment section down below, guys. Anyway, that brings us to the end of this week's Dev Q&A, and I'm sorry that you had to have ranty Benzie there for this whole thing of, like, how scanning is ruining the game. It's funny that scanning ruining the game, in inverted commas, has actually caused bigger player spikes in local. We're seeing that there are more people online, the market values of things are dropping, which means it's cheaper for people to buy things, which means the economy is moving again, rather than having immense amounts of ISK shored up in a small number of groups' wallets, a small number of players' wallets. It's funny how this killing the game actually does look like the game is suddenly revitalized and people are loving it. It seems to be a very small and, like, very loud minority complaining, and trust me, pause, I know that there are complaints. I do think that the rigs, for example, the scanning rigs, should reduce the amount of your source radius by a little bit more. I do think that. I do genuinely side with people on that. I think the rigs are not quite as good as they should be. I don't think that there should be a skill to reduce your source radius, just like there isn't one to reduce your signature radius. I think the rigs should be enough to do that with, but I think the rigs do need to be better in order to make that work. But this whole thing of, oh, the game is ruined because now I can't do top tier stuff without even playing the game. Oh, I can't do top tier content while watching my YouTube videos. Sorry, I know this may be someone in my comment section and you feel like I'm coming down hard on you. You don't need to flag yourself up. Just please understand, I may like you as a player, but I massively disagree with that concept of I want top tier rewards without actually engaging with the game and focusing on it. I'm sorry, that's not how it works in any game ever. It should not be how it works here. I'm ranting entirely too much. Here's my Hurricane doing a low sec encounter there with the ability to be scanned down. Plenty of webs and a scram there, 2 webs and a scram, just to make sure that if anyone does jump in on me, I have a chance of doing it. I've also popped in a couple of the warp stabilizer rigs there so that I can flee to safety. Yeah, it means my Hurricane's a little bit slower, but you know what? I haven't been killed yet. Anyway, folks, thank you for watching this one right the way to the end. Let me know how wrong I am in the comment section down below. Otherwise, happy sailing, and see you in New Eden.